guys, it's Izzy here, and today we are going to be talking about all the books that I'm excited for that come out in the month of March. Some of these have already come out and some are still yet to be released, but let's get into this video. Y'all might be able to tell historical fiction is my favorite genre. I'm wearing all vintage right now, 60s vintage. We love that. But so the majority of these books are going to be historical fiction, so if you're not into that, I'm sorry. Not really. So the first book we're going to talk about is In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. This book released on March 7th of 2023, and it's from Knopf Publishing Group. I am not sure if I'm saying that right, but a lot of my favorite books do come from them, so definitely want to give this a go. So this is a haunting, virtuosic debut novel about two young men who fall in love during the time of war. It's 1914, which y'all know, World War I said that extremely weird, but World War I is my favorite war to learn about. Like, that sounds bad because I am somebody who's anti-war, but you know, if I want to learn about a war, that's what I want to learn about. It's 1914, and World War I is ceaselessly churning through thousands of young men on both sides of the fight. The violence of the front feels far away to Henry Gaunt, Sidney Elwood, and the rest of their classmates, safely ensconced. I always tell y'all, I hate when they use these big words that nobody uses in these descriptions, because then when you read the actual book, it does not use that kind of vocabulary, but okay. And their idyllic boarding school in the English countryside. News of the heroic deaths of their friends only makes the war more exciting. Gaunt, half German, is busy fighting his own private battle in all-consuming infatuation with his best friend, the glamorous, charming Elwood, without a clue that Elwood is pinning for him in return. When Gaunt's family asks him to enlist to forestall the anti-German sentiment they face, Gaunt does so immediately, relieved to escape his overwhelming feelings for Elwood. To Gaunt's horror, Elwood rushes to join him at the front, and the rest of their classmates soon follow. Now death surrounds them in all its grim reality, often inches away, and no one knows who will be next. An epic tale of both the devastating tragedies of war and the forbidden romance that blooms in its grip. In Memoriam is a breathtaking debut. It sounds it, and I'm like, how... I mean, falling in love in war, that does sound like it's something that could very much happen, because you are facing basically life and death every single second, but it's like, how do you go about that? Especially 100 years ago, with this being a gay romance. So, like, ooh... I can't imagine. And then the one guy being half German, but serving in the English military. Can't imagine. That sounds difficult. So then we have another English book, and that is The Lost English Girl by Julia Kelly. This was published once again on March 7th, and it is by Gallery Books. So the acclaimed author of The Light Over London, never heard of that, so might have to look into that, weaves an epic saga of love, motherhood, and betrayal set against World War II. Y'all know if you've watched my videos, but if you haven't, I am really looking for books that focus on the civilian life during these wars, because so many are about the violence of the war, being a spy in the war, being in the resistance, which is all awesome, but I feel like that's all we get. I want to know what women back home were doing. Liverpool, 1935. Raised in a strict Catholic family, Viv Byrne knows what's expected of her. Marry a Catholic man from her working class neighborhood and have his children. However, when she finds herself pregnant after a fling with Joshua Levinson, a Jewish man with dreams of becoming a famous jazz musician, Viv knows that a swift wedding is the only answer. So another forbidden romance during war. Her only solace is that marrying Joshua will mean escaping her strict mother's scrutiny. But when Joshua makes a life-changing choice on their wedding day, Viv is forced once again into the arms of her disapproving family. 5 years later, and on the eve of World War II, Viv is faced with the impossible choice to evacuate her young daughter Maggie to the countryside estate of the affluent Thompson family. In New York City, Joshua gives up his failing musical career to serve in the Royal Air Force, fight for his country, and take a piece together and tried to piece together his feelings about the family wife and daughter he left behind at 19. However, tragedy strikes when Viv learns that the countryside safe haven she sent her daughter to wasn't immune from the horrors of war. I probably got bombed, but okay. It is only years later, with Joshua's help, that Viv learns the secrets of their shared past and what it will take to put a family back together again, telling the harrowing story of England's many evacuated children. Best-selling author Julia Kelly's The Lost English Girl explores how one simple choice can change the course of a life and what we are willing to forgive to find a way back to the ones we love and thought lost. Oh my gosh, y'all, that is exactly what I want to read at the moment. So definitely going to have to look for this book next time I go to Barnes & Noble. Hopefully they have it, because some books are just on Amazon. Some are at Barnes & Noble. You never know where you're going to find a book. But this one sounds amazing, because as it sounds like it is going to be at home in Liverpool, and then we have a New York City plot, which I care more about the Liverpool, and seeing how a woman deals with all those things and in the time of war, like, and in a country that was getting bombed and everything. I've talked about this before. When I've gone to Europe, I've gone to England, Germany, Italy, you know, all those places were getting bombed, all by different sides. And every time I'd see old people, this is so weird, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they were in a country that, and two of those countries were under dictatorships, but all these countries were getting bombed. I can't imagine that. It's just insane to me. So our next book here is one that's a little more close to home, and that is The Last Carolina Girl by Megan Church. This author is actually doing a signing at a bookstore that I am going to be near this week, but I'm not going to the book signing, but I would like to, but I don't have the time. So this releases on March 28th, and it's coming from Source Books. So a searing book club novel for fans of Where the Crawdads Sing, which I'm not a massive fan of, and The Girls in the Stilt House. That's a book I want to read but just haven't got to. Following one girl fighting for her family, her body, and her right to create a future all her own. So yeah, it has some grammatical errors here, but okay. Some folks will do anything to control the wild spirit of a Carolina girl. Okay, we'll go on that rant in a minute. For 14-year-old Lee Payne, life is her beloved coastal Carolina town is as simple as it is free. Devoted to her lumberjack father and running through the wilds where the forest meets the shore. I would love to do that. Leah's country life is as natural as the Lollapalooza pines. I just call them pine trees, but okay. That rise to greet the southern sky. When an accident takes her father's life, Leah is wrenched from her small community and cast into a family of strangers with a terrible secret. Separated from her own home, Leah is kept apart from the family and forced to act as a helpmate for the well-to-do household. When a moment of violence and prejudice thrusts Leah into the center of the state of shameful darkness, she must fight for her own future against a world that doesn't always value the wild spirit of a Carolina girl. Set in 1935 against the very real background of a recently formed state eugenics board, The Last Carolina Girl is a powerful and heart-wrenching story of fear, strength, forgotten history, autonomy, and the places and people we ultimately call home. I am sorry that my nose and eyes are watering. I don't know what's up with that, but one thing I don't like about this, it just says Carolina. It's big on being a Carolina girl, which born and bred right here, lived here for basically a quarter of a century. It doesn't say North or South Carolina, and I'm like, which one is it? Y'all know I'm in North Carolina every month, but South Carolina is home, and I'm like, which one are you talking about? Because everybody ignores South Carolina, me yelling at the book. So this one, I'm thinking it's going to be Take My Hand. Was that the name of the book that was about people in the system? Were they in the system? Kind of. And like children, minors, who were having hysterectomies performed on them just because they were from poverty. And a lot of times it was people of color. I don't know in this book what the case is, but that's what it's sounding like. It's kind of that same theme, which that was one of my favorite books of last year, and I do think these are such important things. And I know in North Carolina it was very prevalent back like in the 1970s. I know this said 1935, And I had no idea about any of it, and that it was happening like in my own area. It was just crazy to me of just things that the American government was doing on its people. And a lot of times they were putting women on the depot shot, and at this time there was not a lot of research on the side effects and what the depot shot could do to somebody. I know people still get that shot. I don't know, because that is not a method I wanted to look into for myself. But I do know that at that time there was not a lot of research, so they were basically doing research on these women, which is terrible. Okay, second to last one now, and that is Wild, Beautiful, and Free by Sophronia Scott. This is published on March 1st, and it's by Lake Union, which I think is through Amazon. This one, I don't know how I feel about that title. I don't really like the title, but to me, titles and covers aren't that important. So, born the daughter of an enslaved woman and a Louisiana plantation owner, Jeanette Beban is raised alongside her white half-sister until her father suddenly dies. His vindictive wife refuses 12-year-old Jeanette her inheritance and sells her into slavery. Now on her own, Jeanette must fight the injustices she faces because of her mixed race. She escapes enslavement and travels from Mississippi to Philadelphia to New York to Ohio, all while searching for purpose, love, and her place in a country torn asunder by the burgeoning Civil War. Everything seems to fall into place when she meets Christian Robichaud Colchester. I am not good with French. The white proprietor of Fortitude Mansion, a safe haven for escaped slaves where Jeanette teaches. But despite their instant connection, Jeanette isn't convinced she belongs in his circle. In a world that tells her she doesn't fit anywhere, Jeanette must decide what's more important, bending to the expectations of others or embracing her true self. So again, we have somebody finding their self coming to age during a time of war, being in a civil war, which I think is a whole different ballgame than a world war. I read the Book of Lost Friends, something like that, by Lisa Wingate, which was one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book, from a few years ago. And it kind of reminds me of that, because we had a white daughter of a plantation owner, then his daughter that he had with, I don't know if it was one of his slaves or somebody else, but an illegitimate daughter. And then there was this somebody who I think was just a slave on the plantation, and seeing how they came of age and had to find where they fit in with society during a tumultuous time in history. And I know I only said to talk about my DNA in videos. I do have some sub-Saharan African DNA, and chances are it was from somebody who was a slave. And to think back of how I wonder about that story. I wonder how all that came about and what their life was like. I think about that quite a bit anytime I open 23andMe or Ancestry.com and see those numbers. So I always want to know how people lived in the past. So we're moving on to our last book now. The last book publishes on March 21st, so tomorrow, or the day that you're watching this video, by Farr, Straus, and Giroux. French. But Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. Now this is a long description, so bear with me. From one of our fierce stylists, a roaring epic chronicling the life, times, and secrets of a notorious artist. When X, an iconoclastic artist, writer, and polarizing shapeshifter, falls dead in her office, her widow, wild with grief and refusing everyone's good advice, hurls herself into writing a biography of the woman she defied. Though X was recognized as a crucial creative force of her era, she kept a tight grip on her life story. Not even CM, her wife, knew where X had been born, and in her quest to find out, she opens a Pandora's box of secrets, betrayals, and destruction. All the while, she immerses herself in the history of the Southern Territory, a fascist theocracy that split from the rest of the country after World War II, so quite different here. This is finally in the present day, forced into an uneasy reunification and masterfully constructed. Okay, so the rest isn't really about the book, but this sounds more sci-fi, and we know I love kind of that dystopian, so seeming like a part of America split off and is now coming back, all history kind of thing going on, and somebody who's like real big fashion person. I think that all sounds super cool. Tell me in the comments which of these you're most excited for, or about some books I didn't even mention. What books are you excited for in March? But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way through, leave an X emoji down below in the comments. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!